Thanks, everybody. For those of you that I haven't met, my name's Caroline Fishpool. I'm the principal of Wirreanda Secondary School, and I've had the privilege of leading the school for the last 6 years, including as a Year 7 high school pilot. I do want to introduce Katrina Axford, the senior leader of the middle school, and Amy Newbound, one of our leaders of the middle school as well. So you'll just hear a little bit from me at the start, particularly about the context and some of the things that we feel perhaps as you're sitting in the waiting lounge to fly on the plane and we're kind of in it, flying it and building it as we go. Some key learnings that we've kind of stumbled as Year 7 to high school pilots with. And I think one of the key things that we talk about when we've had the privilege, like I said, on an ongoing basis to share our journey quite a bit over the last 2 years is that nothing that we're going to share today is right or wrong. It's purely what fits into our context and what's worked for us. And if it hasn't worked, we've changed it pretty quickly. So that's been one of the key learnings that we've actually worked through. A little bit about our school, if you don't know, we're a Category 3 school situated in the southern suburbs of Adelaide. Complexity-wise, one of the things that we talk about very proudly is the complexity that we actually do have at our school. It means that any student that walks into our school to enrol, we can actually cater for. Now, in saying that, that complexity does bring significant challenges with it, which is some of the things that we'll talk about today. So over a period of time, as you can see, numbers-wise, from 2016, when I took over as principal, we had 790 students-ish, and we moved through to building capacity for 1,300 next year. Now, in saying that, we don't want to get any bigger than that. Being a school where we actually know our students and are able to actually enact the processes that we're talking about today are really key to the culture that we've actually built and are continuing to build at Wirreanda Secondary School. So we are very proud of the different things that we can actually cater for people that come and enrol with us. We are a specialist sports school, one of 2 fully funded schools ourselves in Henley Beach. We do bring in obviously students from out of zone, a very small number, into that program with a focus on elite athletes. We have a fantastic disability unit, 2 classes and 2 special classes. We did open up a second special class as a result of the Year 7 to high school move. And the complexity, like I said, is something that we really embrace. So we do have 12% ATSE, and that continues to increase in size significantly every year. 14% students with disability, kind of floats between 14 and 16%, and 2.5% ILD, which for all the other schools is a very interesting number, and it's a number that we would actually love it to be higher, but that's the community that we exist within. And that itself, as you can imagine, has its own challenges with 2.5% ILD. We do also have, probably similar to some stories that Rosie talked about this morning, particularly as a Year 7 high school pilot, both with the sharing that we've done, with the processes that we've put into place, recognised very early on the complexities that we were actually bringing into the school as well. And I'll very openly say, and it's a great challenge that you'll be faced with next year, no matter what supports we actually put into place as a Year 7 to high school, the double cohort smacked us in the face. Absolutely, particularly about this complexity piece and some supports that we continued. And I think probably the important thing is just being open to the fact that you need to be flexible and agile coming into that piece, because certainly the numbers, as you can see, that we did actually transition in are not as big as some of the schools' numbers that you're bringing in, because we've been really fortunate that we've actually been able to stagger it. So we do bring in 50%-ish of students that are below SEA when we talk about reading and numeracy, and those percentages are very similar. As Graham asked about the whole piece around, we post-COVID are running at about 82% attendance. So you can imagine the percentage of students that we actually bring in transition-wise that are chronic and habitual non-attenders. And certainly that's been a conversation piece, through stakeholders as a Year 7 to high school pilot, and something that we really grapple with. Because one of the things that you'll hear us and you've heard the other schools talk about today is the majority of programs that we talk about and that we own are about kids that are at our school. What misses out in regards to whether it's system structures or school structures, and we've tried to bring in a few things that Katrina, I think, will talk about, with those kids that are absolutely refusing to come out from under the doona. And how do we actually still give those kids an education before they just either don't show up through the 7 to high school transition, or they obviously pathway down a pathway that we just don't want those kids to go down. So what are some of the key findings? I'm going to front load some things before we talk about some sharings, particularly with Amy and Katrina, that we have found really clearly through the Year 7 to pilot, either that have been real celebration pieces or that we've grappled with. One of the things that we talk very openly about is that Year 7s have absolutely added considerably to our school community. We love having them at the school. In saying that, I think one of the really nice things that also brings with it challenges at some lunchtimes, etc., is that Year 7s have a real raw energy that we don't see with the Year 8s when they actually come into the school. They're desperate to learn, they're desperate to engage with teachers. One of the examples, very basic, that we talk about is that still when you walk out into the yard, the Year 7s are playing chasey, and it means the Year 8s feel like they can be kids. And it's added a really different facet to the culture of the school. One of the things we also talk very openly about is that we did not, when we were at this stage where you're all at the moment, give our Year 7s enough credit that we were transitioning to the school. There was lots of commentary, rightly so, probably at that time, not now, about whether they would be okay in high schools, whether there's the whole Year 7s are so little, talking about the anxieties, were high school staff going to look after them like primary school staff do? And there were all these things that we were trying to put into place. When we actually got those Year 7s, we realised they were resilient and we realised they wanted to be in high school. What we didn't capture in our transition piece was the anxiety of our parents. So we had significant anxieties, and obviously that was one of the things that we did kind of continue to build the plane with that piece, and we tried to engage them and continue in what's called our home learning policy. I'm not going to go into detail about that today, but if you want to grab me, happy to answer questions about that. One of the things we also, I think we're very clear about this prior to bringing the students in, and now we've got them, is making sure, because what we did see maturity level-wise is a big difference between 7s and 8s. So absolutely, there were some things that we'll talk about today that we aligned transition processes together. It was common sense, but there were also some very separate things that we did with the Year 7s and with the Year 8s that were obviously matched to where they were coming into the school maturity level-wise. One of the other things that we constantly talk about is don't forget the Year 8s. I think as we come into this transition piece, which is really exciting for South Australia, one of the key things we talk about, and we've really utilised it to actually transform and continue to transform our middle school and our whole school culture, is not forgetting about those Year 8s. Because on that day one, you can imagine the media hype that's going to exist across the Year 7s. For us, we talked long and hard about how we were going to kind of create some excitement for them, and for us, what worked really well is really celebrating and kept telling the story that they were the first Year 8 cohort that had ever come into Wirreanda Secondary School, but not the youngest. And that was a real celebration for peace for us as a school. I think the other really important thing, and you won't hear too much today, but we may touch upon it, is certainly the value that primary teachers have added to our school community. We are one of the schools that talk very publicly, and even pre the pilot have gone out looking for primary skilled staff, and they've been an incredible addition to the school. So probably just an important piece talking transition-wise about bringing those people into the piece, particularly with schools that were fortunate to get them in the recruitment phase. Obviously, when we moved into being a pilot, it was announced very quickly. We were in the middle of a middle school transformation piece, if you've heard our story, but we also knew the structures that we had in place weren't going to actually work with bringing in the double cohort. So in 2017, our middle school structure was, I would say, quite traditional. We had kind of a flat structure across our senior leader band 3s. They kind of had a year level attached to them, but had lots of other responsibilities. We had a traditional student council middle school role that was a paid position with point 2 teaching. And then we had year level leaders, much like Murray Bridge, attached to year level leaders. What we found at that time was that no one actually owned the middle school. And we had kids being passed from one person to the next, much like Murray Bridge talk about, in regards to those challenges. So what we did was, and this is us moving into next year, we have also moved in the last few years to a vertically grouped model. So we obviously have our houses, which we have led, I think, a fantastic change process in the last 4 or 5 years to actually expand that beyond sports day, much like the challenge of Murray Bridge talking about. But what we also did learn beyond bringing in the leader band 1s across each of those vertically grouped houses was when we got this year in particular with our bigger numbers that we were bringing in, is that we needed specialist services wrapped around that complexity that I talked about that we really celebrate as a school. So you'll see obviously we actually do not have a traditional middle school counsellor anymore, but what we are looking for is a middle school learning and culture band 1, so if you're interested, give me a yell. We also do have 2 full-time SSO3 youth workers within our Learner Wellbeing Centre. We've just instigated an SSO2 attendance, much like Rosie talked about, to remove some of those things that, particularly with students not attending with the chase up. And we have just put into place for next year a leader band 2 that can actually oversee those specialist services that we all desire to have in our schools, and to actually work towards instigating a few more of them across the school. So I think that specialist support around those complexity kids was a big learning curve for us when we actually took on the double cohort, and we're still putting processes into place and structures to actually support our students. Transition pre-2020, I think, and you'll see the V1.0, which is version 1.0. As a school, we've actually had a really good transition program for a long period of time, moving from even, regional clusters of people around then through to now. We've always had a really great relationship with our primary school leaders, apart from when we did get announced quickly as a pilot, but we managed to work through that with them. And we've come out the other end, I think, much closer. In saying that, one of the things that was very lacking when you look through that list was actually really clear links teaching and learning wise. So we had a great relationship, we had information being passed to us, but we did not, when the pilot hit, have really clear links about what we were about curriculum and pedagogy wise, or that transfer of, like I said, kids being below SEA, and how do we actually all work together to actually move them. And on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Amy.
Thanks, Caroline. Like she said, I'm one of the middle school house leaders as well as one of the transition leaders at Wirreanda Secondary School, and I've been lucky enough to be part of this journey right from when the pilot was announced in 2019 to 2021. So this is a snapshot of the events that we organise for our students and our parents and the community for our transition program. We start off each year with what we call Odyssey at Wirreanda Secondary School. That is an event that we put out to our feeder primary schools teachers and leaders. They come and learn about what our pedagogy is and what our learning structures are at Wirreanda Secondary School. So Katrina will talk about this in a moment, but we are a project-based learning school, so we have a huge interdisciplinary approach in both our middle school and senior school. So it's really important for our feeder primary school teachers and leaders to start using those common languages, common terms in the primary schools, getting those students ready to transition in throughout the year. We have obviously a specialist sports course that happens at our school. Those students will go out and visit schools, the staff and leaders go with them, and they sort of spruik the program, which is important as well. In the later stages of term 1, we invite feeder primary schools, including those in our partnership, to half-day visits. So we have an essential question, which is what makes a healthy learner, and students come in even if they're thinking about Wirreanda as a potential option for secondary school or not. They're still invited to come in and experience half a day as a Wirreanda Secondary School student. Most of those sessions involve our elective teachers. We're really lucky, as we know, as secondary school staff, that we have incredibly talented teachers with a lot of expertise in their elective areas, so we really put them on show, and we make sure students have the opportunity to see that when you come to Wirreanda Secondary School, that our teachers are experts in those learning areas and they're engaging. In the first 2 years of the pilot program, we had the Year 7 Leading the Way Day, which is the jumper design day. That was one of the huge sticking points of the pilot program, the jumpers. So we made sure that that was a really important day for our Year 6s into Year 7s to come in and feel like they had their voice and choice being heard. So they came in, it was a project-based learning day, they designed the jumpers, they pitched their ideas. We had students from a number of primary schools that had never met each other before. By the end of the day, they were pitching as a group, and we actually had a group win that didn't know each other at the start of the day, which was fantastic. It also got them ready for that learning structure of learning intentions, success criteria, collaborative learning as well. We offer Tirankanthi Muramuranya, which is our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander student transition day. It's a half-day transition. That day, we obviously invite students who identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander too, but also the Aboriginal education workers at the primary school sites as well. And that's to do with them experiencing what our Aboriginal education team has to offer, but it's that sharing of information as well, which is really important for those students that are at risk and complex. Learner profile interviews is probably one of the most important things that we do as part of our transition program at Wirreanda Secondary School. We did use this from Rooty Hill High in New South Wales, which we have a working relationship with. And they are evenings. Last year we had 3 evenings in a week that our staff sat down and actually had a 30-minute in-depth conversation with families and students about their learning, their behaviours for learning, what their goals are for coming into the high school setting, things that we need to know about the family, etc. So it's really important that students then have that deep connection with at least one staff member they have even before the full day transition day at the end of the year, which we found really important. There's still students that come up to me that go, oh, you did my learner profile interview, do you remember me? So it's really nice to see they have that connection and a sense of belonging before they even start. We obviously offer parent and student information nights, as I'm sure most of you do as well. It's important then to have airtime for parents to ask those questions. We know, like Caroline said, they're quite anxious about things, so that's a good opportunity. And then obviously our full day transitions. We have 1 full day transition for year 6s into 7, 1 day full transition for 7s into 8, and they are both project-based learning days. So they have a project, they have to create a chair that a teacher then has to stand on and see if it falls or not, which is really fun. Okay, so we obviously have a lot of students with complex needs that come into our site. So these are some of the ways we support those students and the families and carers. So learner profile interviews. What we do with that data is collated. Our wonderful ICT team, they put it into an A4 document, and that's available on DayMap. That's our learner management system that we use. So teachers can click into that at the start of the year, and they can start doing their class context sheets with that information as well, which is really important in that week 0, week 1 planning stage. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students are supported by 2 ASETOs, as well as an Aboriginal education teacher, and then obviously the half-day transition visit for them. We have ongoing and additional visits on offer for students with disabilities, as well as students in care. So I work quite closely with the inclusive learning leader, as well as the wellbeing leader for middle school to facilitate those, and that's on a needs basis. Student referral team meetings, so working with support services to see who is referred to behaviour, referred to attendance. It's really important, obviously Caroline said we have a lot of chronic and habitual non-attendance students that come into our site, so we're working with them from the get-go to get them either referred before they come in or referred straight away that following year. One of the sticking points for us is we know every student that comes into our site, whether that be through the learner profile interview or the sharing of information with primary school teachers at afternoon teas. That's something that we really pride ourselves on, and that's documented quite heavily on our learner management system too. Going into the following year, we have live tracking and monitoring of data, so attendance, behaviour and academic achievement through Power BI dashboards and such, that the house leaders then use to specifically case manage students that are at risk. All right.
Hello everyone. So I'm here to talk about the adjustments that we made for engagement. I think I should start off by saying that quality teaching and learning was at the centre of everything that we did. So when we were announced as a pilot, one of the things that we did, well, one of the key things that we did was we reviewed and consolidated the Year 8 curriculum. And we wrote a teaching and learning handbook and the implications of teaching project-based learning. We knew that we had the opportunity to map bands of the Australian curriculum for the very first time. So HPE, the arts and D&T were that first moment that we were able to map out what that would look like in the achievement standards that we, as the last state in Australia, were not able to do. So that was a key thing for us. What we did when we announced that we were a pilot is in term 3, we got together and all the learning area leaders and I and key leaders, other key leaders, mapped out the Australian curriculum for year 7 and 8. What that allowed us to do was really think sequentially about what we were going to do in the first year of our pilot. You can see probably the photo up here where we've got on the corner, it's really small, but our beautiful planning in 2019, all structured. That's where we are at the moment with the second image. It's a moving beast, and we are certainly working and refining and figuring things out, and what we've learnt from the first 18 months of the pilot. So one of the things that we knew is the why was really important for why we were bringing Year 7s into high school. So when we were developing the program for Year 7, we developed these graphics. And these graphics were very much driving our curriculum. So these are the visual aids for not only our students, but the staff that were coming into Wirreanda. This was our vision. This is what we stood for. So we knew that we wanted to have learners coming in that were collaborative, that had creative thinking, that had critical thinking and communication. These are the things that we knew that going into when they were going to do their SACE that they were going to need. So it was a really very much a backwards by design approach, and we wanted the language to be really simple. To be a good learner, you need those 4 things. What we also knew is that we wanted to develop students' vocab in these particular areas. So in Year 7, we really focus on kids being collaborative and also about communication and what that means. In Year 8, we develop that further, and we want them to be critical and creative thinkers. We want the kids to really understand what those 4 things mean. When we were developing our projects, because we do projects in Year 7 and in Year 8, these are the graphic here. The drivers of a curriculum is what's driving our planning. So we want students in every project to have student voice. We want them to have choice. We want them to be entrepreneurial thinkers. We want it to be personal, that it means something to get to them. Rosie said something in her speech about kids coming to school. If it means something to them, they will get out of bed and come to school. And we want to empower them to actually change the community that they're in. So what that meant was that we were ambitious with Year 7 because in Year 8 we have project-based learning where teaching teams are core subjects, so maths, science, English and HASS, and there's a specialist teacher in each teaching team, and there's 4 teaching teams in Year 8. But what we wanted to do in Year 7 was we wanted to connect it with electives as well. So currently we have 131 Year 7s, which means that we've got 5 classes. Now we call them tribes, and those tribes are purple, blue, pink, yellow, and no, that's not right, teal. I can't forget the last one. And what they do is those students go together around the whole day, and they have specialist teachers, but they also connect with either the arts or design and technology. That was a real game changer for us, and it is ambitious. That was the bit that we were being sky-high thinking with connecting with elective subjects. So that has been a game changer for us. But the other thing that we've also done in 2021 is we've also brought in a language, Auslan. Now our community in primary schools were doing Auslan, and at the learner profile interviews it came out that parents wanted that to continue. So this year we've brought in Auslan, which has been fantastic. The kids have really connected to it. So we've brought a language in Year 7 this year that we didn't have in our first year of the pilot, which has been fantastic. The last line, because we have a 7-line structure, is we've also developed an enrichment line where student efficacy is the driving factor. So it's kind of like the teachers get out of the way, and kids get voice and choice over what they want to do in that particular line. So we have 5 offerings at the moment, all the way from Beat Bam Boom, which is creative body play, to Staples from Scratch, which is very much inspired by the granny skills movement, and gardening, and things like that. So that's been a real game changer. So no matter what we've done in regards to transition, the teaching and learning has certainly been our focus at Wirreanda for our students to be engaged. For students who continue to be not accessing the learning like we would want, we've actually had to develop some strategic programs over the last 2 years. So one of the things that we do to continue that engagement right at the start of the year and set students up for success is our boot camp. Very much like a welcome week or some other people had different titles. We have a staggered start, so our Year 7s and our Year 8s start with our Year 12s on the first day, and they will go into a boot camp, and it is purely about setting them up for success. This is Wirreanda, this is how it works, this is what we do. One of the biggest things that the kids will talk about, and they did for us, is this school is big and it looks the same, and the codes on our timetables I don't understand. So that's one thing from the Year 7s that we had to repeat consistently so they understood where things were. Kids will talk a lot about we need to know where things are. They want tours, and they want multiple tours because they are overwhelmed. So boot camp is about setting up your BYODs, setting up your Wi-Fi, getting your locker code. Those things that can be, quite nervous for some of the kids, so we make sure that we do that over the first 2 days is we have a boot camp. The Year 9s, 10s and 11s start on the second day, and then we get into learning on the third day. Our FLIP program has been something that we've had to develop for our chronic non-attenders. There have been a significant amount of students coming from primary school that haven't accessed learning for a very, very long time. So the FLIP program was to avoid students going on exemption, and it was utilising our online learning platforms that we had spent a significant amount of time and training in and knew that kids could access learning at home. So the FLIP program uses our online learning system, so we use Google Classroom, we use MyOn Reader, and we also use MathSpace. We have a Point 2 lead teacher in the Wellbeing Centre that case manages the students that are on the FLIP program. They may have not accessed learning for a very, very long time. So it's about re-engaging the parents and re-engaging the student to just access learning. Maybe not the school, but we bring that into the student's timetable once they've started to access some learning. It's a 4-week program that we review every 4 weeks, and we had 6 students last year that were chronic non-attenders that are now coming to school, not on a full-time timetable, but at least accessing some learning, which is a big thing for a Year 7/8 student to do. We also have the WIN program. What I Need program is something that we've developed this year for at-risk girls that could possibly be ex-funded students, or they could be students in care or kids just coming to school but not accessing learning at all. So that's been something that's been developed in regards to students that are becoming really disengaged with learning, and we need to get them back on track. Home learning is something that we've utilised for high ceiling thinking, so kids accessing learning 24/7 and actually giving kids access to learning at all times. So that's been something that we've put a lot of work into over the last 18 months, and that's very much differentiated for all types of learners. So that's something that has been developed. Something that we've always done prior to the pilot and the work we did with Yongzhou is exposing our students to opportunities. We don't know what we don't know until we know it, and our students sometimes don't get those experiences outside of school that perhaps other students would. So exposure days are really, really important to us. Last year was foiled a little bit by COVID, that we couldn't get kids out as much as we want, but it's really an opt-in opportunity for kids to go out and do things that they wouldn't normally do. And Waylo Week. Transition for us is not just prior to the kids coming in and then that's it. we transition kids in and out of every year level in different ways. So for us, Walo Week is the last week of the year. It's called Wicked Awesome Learning Opportunities. It's come from High Tech High, and it's something that we transition kids out with every year level going out of our school. Other programs that we have brought into the school is Ice Factor, Operation Flinders, which most people would know about. This year we've brought in the Lighthouse Balance program, again working with ex-funded students and students in care. So that's something that the boys, majority, there are some girls, but we've had most of it's been male participation in regards to learning how to bike ride and being mentored by some really amazing people that have come in. One of the things that we did have in the program, in the pilot the first year, was Kids. So 4 students at risk in every feeder primary school would come every week to Wirreanda and work with Kids and Amy as the transition leader. So we had about 22 students that came to our school every week. It's a program that we didn't continue on with because it was a lot of work and it wasn't necessarily meeting the needs of those particular students. So that's something that we haven't continued on with. But this is certainly the programs that we've developed will continue to develop over the next couple of years. Learner agency and student voice is something that's was beyond the pilot, but we can really start to see the benefits now with the first lot of Year 7s that we had last year now being in Year 8, and now they're leaders. So we've actually got in 2 of our houses Year 8 leaders. So our structure is that we have house captains in middle school and house captains in senior school, and that has been, I think that was one of those moments where Caroline and I looked up at the stage and just knew that the pilot was something amazing to be a part of, because we had students that were only a term into Year 8 standing up and actually leading the awards assembly where there was no teachers that were doing much at all, which was fantastic. So that's been something that has been a game changer for us, about having the leadership structure being down in middle school as well, because age doesn't make you a leader. Information nights, we had a lot of them in 2019, preparing for our first cohort of Year 7s. And we had the kids speak. We'd get the kids to tell the other kids what Year 7's like, what the first day's like, what lockers are like, you know, all of those things, BYOD, Google Classroom. So we have our students speak, and that's really powerful for the parents to hear as well, because we do have those anxious parents. So every information night, students are a key part of that, and they're not the same students. We don't just pick the ones that are perhaps the ones we notice the most. It might be a range of students. Peer mentors has been something that has developed through the pilot as well. We knew we wanted something, and it's the feedback we got from the Year 7s going into Year 8. They did say that we want people. We want to know who we can ask where UBO8 is. So what we did is we developed the peer mentor program, and they are a key part of our transition days, our transition events, and they wear badges so the students can identify them quite easily, and they can ask them questions, which has been really, the feedback that we've actually got from the students has been really good. We've had PBL projects where students have designed outdoor spaces for the Year 7 pilot. That's still in working progress because we're still in the middle of our build, or nearly at the end. So that's been really important. And our perception survey data. This week, the kids are nominating to be a part of the analysis team, working with a lead teacher. And that teacher is going to go through the student perception survey data, and what will happen is they will present that back to staff, and also they will work with key staff on how to improve our school. So that's something that we've done for a very long time and continue to do. 1 minute. Okay, our first 100 days, our staggered starts, our boot camp. We have a family barbecue in week 2, so parents can meet their home group teachers and their house leaders. We launch home learning. We will have a Year 7 camp to Woodhouse in week 4. We have a transition camp that we hold we value that. We have specialised teaching and learning, and we launch PBL projects and SSE. We'll have learner conversation evenings in approximately week 6, where parents can come in and have conversations with their home group teachers about their students' learning. We will launch the House Cup, very much built around our school values and builds on from the sports day that we hold. We'll have excursions, we'll have school culture events, we'll have peer mentor-led activities, and they will check in on our Year 7s and 8s in structured time. We'll have BYO inductions, which is really important to our school because that has been a problem in the past, and the students will become an expert in using Daymap, Google Classroom, and our WSS portal.
Thanks, Katrina and Amy. Just to finish off, and probably 2 things just to leave people with. It's interesting listening to, all of the different things that we've talked about, Brighton, Craigmore, Murray Bridge, and I think the big learning curve for us at the start was, and I remember, losing sleep and doing this high-level planning around these concepts that we thought were really important. Then we went and talked to the incoming Year 7s and Year 8s, and it wasn't important to them. So I think that's a really important thing when we talk about student voice, is really getting that voice really early on, much like the schools have talked about today, to see what matters, because what matters to them is some of the things that we didn't think would matter. So that's a really important thing. But probably just to finish off on a question that we often, like I said, we are very flexible and agile, trying to readjust as we go on and get things right. And I don't think we ever will, so we'll just keep going. But one of the questions that we constantly ask ourselves, and I know last week we were talking about our Year 7 and Year 8 camps and that we do really value camps, is what will the graduating class of 2027 talk about at Year 12 graduation? What matters to them? Thanks, everyone.